They said she killed the queen. They stripped her title, her home, her name, cast her into the outer districts like garbage. Naira Voss, once the palace's most gifted healer, now treated beggars in mud-soaked alleys while the kingdom celebrated her disgrace. But tonight, fate dragged a dying war commander to her doorstep, poisoned by something no healer dared touch. Kalen Drax, an alpha. The very symbol of everything that destroyed her. She could let him die. She should. Instead, Naira made a choice that would shatter kingdoms. Stay with me until the end. This story will blow your mind. Drop a like and tell me what city you're watching from. The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the narrow alleyways of the outer ring into rivers of filth. Naira Voss stood in the doorway of what used to be a grain storage shed, watching water cascade off the torn canvas she'd rigged as an awning. Her hands were stained brown from bloodroot powder, her hair plastered to her face, and somewhere in the back of the cramped space, old Mira was coughing again. Wet, rattling sounds that meant pneumonia if Nira didn't find better herbs by morning. 3 years. 3 years since they dragged her through the palace gates in chains, since the High Council had stripped her of her sigil, since they'd branded her a failure and thrown her into these forgotten streets like spoiled meat. Healer Voss? The voice came from the rain, young and uncertain. Nira looked up to see a girl, maybe 14, soaked to the bone and shivering. Behind her, 2 older boys struggled to carry something between them, a makeshift stretcher cobbled together from a door and rope. No, not something, someone. "We found him in the canal," the girl stammered. "We didn't know where else. Everyone said you were the only one who'd bring him in." Nira's voice was flat, automatic. She'd learned not to ask questions in the outer ring. Questions meant involvement, and involvement meant trouble. The boys hauled their burden inside, grunting with effort. When they laid him down on her only table, a scarred piece of wood balanced on crates, Naira got her first good look. Her breath stopped. Even unconscious, even covered in mud and canal water, she knew that face. Everyone in the kingdom knew that face. Commander Kalen Drax, the Iron Wolf. The king's right hand, victor of the northern campaigns. The alpha who'd broken the siege at Iron Pass and killed 300 men in a single night. "Get out," Nira said quietly. "But, get out!" The girl hesitated, looking between Naira and the commander. "They're looking for him. The palace guards, the Shadow Corps, everyone. They say he's a traitor. They say he killed—" "I don't care what they say." Nira's voice was ice. "You brought him here. That's already enough to get you executed. So unless you want to die tonight, you run. Now." The 3 kids bolted into the rain without another word. Naira stood alone with the unconscious commander, listening to old Mira's coughing from the back room, feeling her pulse hammering in her throat. She should turn him in. One message to the guards, and she'd have enough gold to leave this hellhole forever. Maybe even buy back a shred of her old life. Instead, she found herself reaching for his wrist, checking his pulse. Thready. Erratic. His skin was gray, lips tinged blue, and when she pulled back his eyelids, his pupils were blown wide, completely unresponsive to her candle's light. Poison. But not just any poison. She'd seen enough toxins in her palace years to recognize the patterns. This was something else, something that made her healer's instincts scream in warning. She pressed her fingers to his neck, letting her senses drift beneath his skin. The technique was forbidden, had been forbidden even before her exile, but in the outer ring no one cared about the old laws. What she felt made her jerk back, gasping. It was like touching rot itself, not physical decay, but something worse, a wrongness that seemed to twist reality around it, making her vision blur and her stomach heave. Black veins spiderwebbed under his skin, pulsing with something that definitely wasn't blood. Shadow poison. "Buck," Nira whispered. Shadow poison was a myth, a nightmare story the old healers told to scare apprentices. It was supposed to be impossible, poison born from the Voidlands themselves, created by things that shouldn't exist. Except it was very real, and it was killing Commander Drax right in front of her. She should let him die. The thought came easily, familiar. Kalen Drax represented everything she'd lost. He was palace-born, alpha-blessed, raised with every privilege while she'd fought for scraps. He'd stood in the throne room that day, silent and perfect in his ceremonial armor, while the High Council stripped her of her title, while they blamed her for the Queen's death, while they called her a failure, a disgrace, a cautionary tale about what happens when lesser healers reached above their station. He hadn't said a word in her defense. None of them had. Naira's hands trembled as she reached for her herb case, the battered leather box that held everything she'd managed to salvage from her old life. "Why?" she asked the unconscious commander. "Why should I save you?" He didn't answer. His breathing was getting shallower. She had maybe an hour, probably less. The shadow poison was spreading fast, creeping through his circulatory system like oil in water. Soon it would reach his heart, and then even the palace's master healers couldn't save him. Not that the palace healers would try anything. They'd probably never even seen shadow poison. Their precious medical texts didn't acknowledge that things like this existed. But Nira had learned a lot in 3 years of treating the desperate and the dying. She'd learned that the old texts were full of lies, that the approved methods were designed more for control than healing, that real medicine happened in the dark spaces the palace pretended didn't exist. She'd learned forbidden things, and she'd gotten very, very good at them. "You're going to owe me for this," she muttered, pulling out ingredients that would have gotten her executed twice over in her palace days. Void-touch nightshade, bone ash from the old graves, crystallized tears from the weeping caves. Components the High Council said were too dangerous, too uncontrollable, too savage for proper healing. The same components that might actually work. She ground them together in her mortar, the paste turning a sick greenish black. The smell made her eyes water, acrid, wrong, like burning hair and spoiled eggs. "This is insane," she said to no one. "This is absolutely insane." But her hands didn't stop moving. She'd failed to save the Queen. That failure had destroyed her life, cost her everything, branded her as incompetent in front of the entire kingdom. But she hadn't actually failed. The Queen had been poisoned, assassinated by someone inside the palace. Naira had known it the moment she'd touched the dying woman, had felt that same unnatural wrongness in her blood. But when she'd tried to tell the High Council, when she'd tried to explain that conventional healing wouldn't work, they'd called her hysterical, desperate, making excuses for her own inadequacy. They'd convicted her of negligence and thrown her out before she could prove the truth. Now that same poison was in front of her again, and this time she had nothing left to lose. Naira spread the paste across Kalen's chest, right over his heart. His skin hissed where the mixture touched, steam rising in thin wisps. She ignored it, reaching for her flint. "If this doesn't work," she told the unconscious commander, "at least we'll both die knowing the palace was wrong." She struck the flint. The paste ignited with a flash of green flame that didn't burn. It froze. Ice spread across his chest in crystalline patterns, beautiful and terrible, diving beneath his skin to chase the shadow poison through his veins. Kalen's back arched, his mouth opened in a soundless scream. Naira grabbed his shoulders, holding him down as the forbidden medicine did its work. She could feel it through her hands. The battle happening inside his body as her concoction hunted the poison like wolves hunting prey. It was working. It was actually working. The shadow poison fought back, trying to retreat deeper into his system, but her mixture was relentless. Wherever the two substances met, there was a flash like distant lightning, and more of that unnatural darkness burned away. Then something changed. The green flames flickered, pulsed, and suddenly Naira felt something flowing back through her hands. Not poison, something else. Power. Raw, overwhelming power that made her gasp and nearly let go. She'd heard about this, whispered about it in the palace, dismissed as romantic fantasy by the serious healers. The bond. A connection that formed when two people's life forces aligned perfectly, when healer and patient became something more than separate beings. It was supposed to be impossible. A myth. Something that only happened in children's stories. But there it was, burning between them like a bridge made of lightning. Through that connection, Naira could feel everything. Kalen's pain, his strength, the terrible weight of whatever he'd been through. And more than that, she could feel his power responding to hers, not fighting it, but amplifying it, creating a feedback loop that sent the healing mixture surging through his system with 10 times its original force. The last of the shadow poison shattered like black glass. Kalen's eyes snapped open. They were gold, pure molten gold, the mark of an alpha in their prime, and they locked on Naira with an intensity that stole her breath. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Kalen's hand shot up and grabbed her wrist. "Who?" he rasped, his voice like gravel. "Are you?" "The woman who just saved your life," Nira said, trying to pull free. His grip was iron. "You're welcome, by the way." "I know you." His eyes narrowed, studying her face. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by something that looked like horror. "You're the healer, the one who failed to save the queen?" Naira's voice was bitter. "Yes, that's me." "The disgraced failure who just accomplished what your palace healers would call impossible. Funny how that works." She yanked her wrist free, stepping back. The connection between them flickered but didn't break. She could still feel him, a constant warm presence at the edge of her awareness. Kalen sat up slowly, looking down at his chest where the green flames had finally died out. The shadow poison was gone. His skin was unmarked except for old scars. "That was shadow poison," he said quietly. "Yes. The palace healers said it was incurable, that I had maybe a day left." The palace healers are idiots who've never treated anything that wasn't already in their precious textbooks. Nira began cleaning up her supplies with sharp, angry movements. "They'd rather let people die than admit their methods are incomplete. You used forbidden techniques. I use techniques that work. You could be executed. I'm already dead to them." The words exploded out of her before she could stop them. "I lost everything 3 years ago. My title, my home, my reputation, everything. So excuse me if I don't care about their rules anymore." Silence filled the cramped shed. Rain hammered on the roof. From the back room, old Mira's coughing had finally stopped. Whether because she was sleeping or because she'd died, Naira couldn't tell. "The queen," Kalen said finally. "You tried to tell them she was poisoned. I remember now. You said someone had used shadow poison, that conventional healing wouldn't work. And they called me a liar trying to save my own skin." "They were wrong," Naira laughed, sharp and painful. "Congratulations, Commander. It only took 3 years and you nearly dying for someone to figure that out." Kalen swung his legs off the table, testing his strength. He moved like a predator even when wounded, all controlled power and deadly grace. "How did you know? The queen's symptoms were nothing like mine." "The feeling." Nira pressed a hand to her stomach, remembering. "When I touched her, I could feel it, that wrongness. Like reality itself was rotting from the inside. I'd never encountered anything like it before, but I knew the standard treatments wouldn't work. So I tried to create something new, something that might actually help. But I ran out of time. They didn't let you finish. They didn't believe me." She met his eyes. "The High Council decided I was incompetent, that I'd failed because I wasn't good enough. Because I was just an Omega pretending to play in the Alpha's world." The words hung heavy between them. Kalen stood, and Naira realized just how big he was, easily a head taller than her, broad-shouldered, built like violence wrapped in skin. This close, she could smell him, blood and rain and something wild like lightning storms over dark forests. "I should have spoken up," he said quietly. "Yes, you should have. I didn't know you were right. You didn't care to find out." He flinched. It was tiny, barely visible, but Naira felt it through their connection, a spike of shame that tasted like acid. "No," he admitted. "I didn't. I accepted what they told me because it was easier than questioning the people I'd been taught to trust." Naira wanted to stay angry. Anger was safe, familiar. Anger had kept her alive in the outer ring when everything else wanted to grind her down. But looking at Kalen now, at the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he held himself like someone who'd been fighting for too long without rest, she found the anger draining away, leaving only tired emptiness. "Why were they hunting you?" she asked. Kalen's expression went dark. "Because I found proof, real proof that the queen was murdered, that the poison came from inside the palace. When I tried to bring it to the king, someone tried to kill me first." "Who?" "I don't know yet, but whoever it is, they have resources. Power. Access to weapons that shouldn't exist." He looked at her steadily. "The same poison that killed the queen. The same poison they tried to use on me." Understanding hit Naira like cold water. "They're still active," she whispered. "Whoever assassinated the queen, they're still in the palace, still in power." "Yes." And they know you are investigating. Yes? So they tried to kill you too? Yes. Fuck. Nira sat down hard on a crate. Fuck. You need to get out of here, out of the city. If they tracked you to the outer ring, they didn't, I made sure. Kaylin moved to the window, peering through the torn canvas at the rain-soaked street. But they'll figure it out eventually. The kids who brought me here, someone will make them talk. Those kids won't last 5 minutes under interrogation. I know. The connection between them pulsed, and Nira felt what Kaylin was feeling. Grim acceptance mixed with determination. He wasn't planning to run. You're going to fight, she said flatly. I'm going to find out who killed the queen and make them pay. That's suicide. You're one person against the entire palace apparatus. I have proof. Documents, names, evidence of payments and meetings, everything I need to expose the conspiracy. Evidence doesn't matter if you're dead. Then I'll try not to die. Nira stood, moving to block the door. No, absolutely not. I didn't waste my herbs saving your life just so you could throw it away on some doomed revenge quest. Kaylin looked at her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. It's not revenge. It's justice. The queen deserved better than to be murdered and forgotten, and you deserve better than to be blamed for it. Something in Nira's chest cracked. She'd spent 3 years telling herself she didn't care, that the palace could rot for all she was concerned, that she was better off without their rules and their politics. But hearing someone finally say she'd been wronged, hearing it from him, of all people, broke something open that she'd kept locked down tight. I can't help you, she said, and her voice came out smaller than she meant. I don't have anything left to give. You just cured shadow poison using techniques that the greatest healers in the kingdom say are impossible. Kaylin stepped closer. You have more power than you realize. Power? Nira laughed bitterly. I live in a shed. I treat beggars for copper coins. I have exactly 3 herbs left in my case and nowhere to get more. You have knowledge they don't, skills they've rejected. You proved tonight that the palace's way isn't the only way. It might not even be the best way. That doesn't matter if no one believes it. I believe it. He held out his hand. Help me, Neravos. Help me find who killed the queen and clear your name at the same time. She stared at his outstretched hand. It would be so easy to take it, to say yes to the first person in 3 years who treated her like someone capable instead of someone broken. But Nira had learned the hard way that hope was dangerous. Hope got you hurt. I don't want vengeance, she said quietly. I just want to be left alone. Kaylin's hand didn't waver. That's not going to happen. If they find out you cured me, they'll come after you too. The moment I walked through your door, you became part of this. That's not fair. No, it's not. Damn him for being right. Nira looked around her shed, at the leaking roof, the stained table, the shelves of scavenged herbs. She thought about old Mira coughing herself to death in the back room because real medicine was too expensive for the outer ring. She thought about the kids who'd brought Kaylin here and how they'd probably be dragged before the Shadow Corps by morning. She thought about the queen, dying while Nira fought desperately to save her, while the High Council watched and judged and decided she wasn't good enough. If I do this, Nira said slowly, we do it my way. I'm not following palace rules anymore. I'm not pretending their methods are sacred. If we're going to expose these people, we do it with real medicine, effective medicine, even if it scares them. A slow smile spread across Kaylin's face. I was hoping you'd say that. And if this gets us both killed, then at least we'll die proving them wrong. Nira took his hand. The moment their skin touched, the connection between them blazed bright. She gasped, feeling his strength pour through her, feeling her knowledge flow back to him, feeling something new form between them that was greater than either alone. This was more than a bond. This was power itself, raw and transformative. Kaylin felt it too. His eyes widened. What? I don't know, Nira said. But I think we just became something the palace has never seen before. Outside, thunder rolled across the outer ring. The rain kept falling, washing the filth from the streets, and in a cramped shed that smelled like herbs and desperation, a disgraced healer and a hunted commander stood together while something old and powerful woke up between them. The palace had tried to break them both. They were about to find out that was a mistake. The rain stopped an hour before dawn, leaving the outer ring steaming in the sudden heat. Naira had spent that hour pulling together everything she owned that mattered, which wasn't much. A second set of clothes, her herb case, a small knife with a chipped blade, the leather journal where she'd recorded every forbidden technique she'd learned since her exile. Kaelin watched from the doorway, alert for any sign of pursuit. The connection between them hummed quietly, a constant awareness of his presence that felt both strange and oddly natural. "We need to move soon," he said, "before the watch changes." "I know." Naira was kneeling beside old Mira's pallet, checking her pulse. Weak but steady. The pneumonia hadn't taken her yet. "I can't just leave her." "You have to." "She'll die." "She'll die anyway if the Shadow Corps comes through here looking for me." Kaelin's voice was matter-of-fact. "At least this way she has a chance." Nira wanted to argue, but he was right. She pressed a small pouch of dried herbs into Mira's weathered hand and whispered instructions the old woman probably couldn't hear. When she stood, Kaelin was already moving toward the back exit, a gap in the wall she'd never bothered to repair properly. "Where are we going?" Naira asked, shouldering her pack. "Somewhere safe. Or safer, anyway." "That's not an answer. It's the best answer I've got right now." They slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness, picking their way through alleys that smelled like rot and desperation. The outer ring was waking up, beggars stirring in doorways, early workers trudging toward the factories, street vendors setting up stalls of questionable food. No one paid them any attention. In the outer ring, minding your own business was the first rule of survival. They'd made it 3 blocks when Nira felt it, a spike of wrongness that made her stumble. Kaelin caught her elbow. "What's wrong?" "Something's." She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to understand what she was sensing through their bond. "Something's hunting. Close." "Shadow Corps?" "Worse." The creature came out of the darkness between buildings like smoke given form. It was vaguely human-shaped but wrong in every detail. Too tall, too thin, joints bending in directions that shouldn't be possible. Where its face should have been, there was only a shifting mass of shadow that hurt to look at directly. "Run," Kaelin said quietly. The thing's head snapped toward them, and even though it had no eyes, Nira felt its attention lock on like a physical weight. They ran. Kaelin moved like violence itself, pulling Naira along when she stumbled, choosing paths through the maze of alleys with practiced precision. But the shadow creature was faster, flowing over obstacles like water, closing the distance with terrifying speed. "What is that thing?" Nira gasped. "Shadowborn, assassins from the Voidlands." Kaelin yanked her around a corner. "They're what happens when you let shadow poison gestate in a living host until it consumes them completely." "That's impossible. Tell that to the thing trying to kill us." They burst into a wider street, and Kaelin immediately changed direction, heading for a collapsed building. He pulled Nira through a gap in the rubble, into a space that might have been a basement once. "Stay quiet," he whispered. They pressed against the damp wall, breathing hard. Through the gap, Naira could see the shadowborn creature prowling past, its movements jerky and wrong. It paused, that eyeless face turning slowly as if tasting the air. Then it kept moving. Nira didn't breathe until it was out of sight. When she finally sucked in air, it came out shaky. "How many of those things are there?" "I've encountered 4 so far." Kaelin was checking the street again. "There are probably more." "Someone's breeding them, creating them on purpose." "Yes." "Using shadow poison." "Yes." Naira's mind raced. Shadow poison was rare, difficult to create, and required knowledge that most healers would never access. To have enough of it to create multiple shadowborn creatures meant someone had resources, expertise, and absolutely no moral boundaries. "The Queen," she said slowly. "They poisoned her as a test, didn't they? To see if it would work on someone powerful." Kaelin looked at her, and she felt his grim confirmation through their bond. "When you saved her life, or tried to, you proved it could be fought," he said. "That knowledge would have been dangerous to whoever was running the experiments. So they made sure I was discredited and exiled before I could spread that knowledge to anyone else." Rage built hot in Naira's chest. "They destroyed my life to cover up their experiments. And now they're trying to tie up loose ends." Kaelin gestured toward where the Shadowborn had disappeared. "I was getting too close to the truth. You proved the poison could be cured. We're both problems that need to disappear. How did they even know you came to me? They didn't. But someone saw those kids dragging me through the streets. Once the Shadow Corps starts questioning people, it won't take long to track me here. Nira slumped against the wall. 3 years of keeping her head down, of surviving day by day in the Outer Ring's brutal anonymity, and now she was right back in the crosshairs of palace politics. This is insane, she muttered. Yes, we're gonna die. Probably. You're not very good at pep talks. That surprised a laugh out of Kaylin, short and sharp. Sorry, I'm more used to leading soldiers than encouraging healers. Well, I'm not a soldier. I don't know how to fight shadowborn monsters. You don't have to fight them. Kaylin checked the street one more time, then helped her to her feet. You just have to help me find who's creating them. Cut off the head, and the body dies. They continued through the Outer Ring, moving in careful stages, always listening for sounds of pursuit. The sun was coming up now, painting the slums in shades of orange and gold that almost made them look beautiful. Kaylin led them to a building that looked abandoned but wasn't. Naira could see the telltale signs. Fresh scratches on the doorframe. A window covered in canvas that was too new, too clean. Boot prints in the dust that were less than a day old. Safe house? She asked. Something like that. He knocked in a specific pattern. 3 fast, 2 slow, 1 fast. The door cracked open and a woman's face appeared in the gap. She was maybe 40, with gray-shot hair and a scar across her cheek that pulled her mouth into a permanent sneer. You're late, the woman said. Had complications. Kaylin pushed past her, pulling Nira inside. This is Naira. She's with me. The woman's eyes narrowed, studying Naira with an intensity that made her want to step back. The disgraced healer? The healer who cured shadow poison, Kaylin corrected. Nira, this is Captain Vex. She runs the resistance network in the Outer Ring. Resistance? Nira looked between them. What resistance? Vex closed and barred the door, then led them deeper into the building. It was bigger than it looked from outside, a warren of rooms connected by narrow hallways. They passed other people, all armed, all watching Naira with suspicion. There's a lot about the kingdom you don't know, Vex said. A lot the palace doesn't want people to know. She brought them to a room in the back where a scarred wooden table held scattered papers and maps. Vex swept them aside to make space, then pinned Naira with that sharp stare again. Kaylin says you can cure shadow poison. That true? I did it once. Could you do it again? Naira thought about her nearly empty herb case. Depends. Do you have void-touched nightshade, bone ash from consecrated graves, and crystallized tears from the weeping caves? Vex blinked. That's a shopping list that'll get you hanged. That's why it works. A slow smile spread across Vex's scarred face. I like her. She's got teeth. The smile faded. But liking you doesn't mean I trust you. Half the people in this city would sell us out for a hot meal. The other half would do it for free just to stay alive. I'm not going to sell you out. Everyone says that. Then why did Kaylin bring me here? Because I'm hoping you're the exception. Vex pulled out a chair and sat, gesturing for them to do the same. Here's the situation. 3 months ago, people started disappearing from the Outer Ring. Not unusual. People disappear here all the time. But these were specific people. Healers, herbalists, anyone with medical knowledge. Nira felt cold creep down her spine. How many? 14 that we know of. Probably more we don't. Where are they being taken? That's what we've been trying to figure out. Vex spread out one of the maps, a hand-drawn layout of the palace district. Kaylin was investigating the queen's death when he stumbled onto evidence of a research facility, somewhere in or near the palace where they're conducting experiments. Experiments on people, Nira said flatly. On healers specifically. Kaylin leaned over the map, pointing to a section near the eastern wall. The documents I found referenced subject acquisition and optimization protocols. They're trying to weaponize healing techniques. Nira couldn't find words. The idea was obscene. Healing was about preserving life, not destroying it. That's exactly what they're doing, Vex said. And they need healers to figure out how. Healers who won't be missed. Healers from the Outer Ring. But why shadow poison specifically? Why not conventional weapons? Because shadow poison is invisible, Kaylin said. It leaves no trace. Someone poisoned by it appears to die of natural causes. Heart failure, system collapse. The perfect assassination tool. Understanding crashed over Naira like cold water. The Queen wasn't the first target. She was just the first important target. Exactly. They've been testing and refining the poison for months, using disposable subjects from the outer ring. The Queen was supposed to be the proof that it worked on powerful alphas. But I interfered. I almost saved her. And that made you dangerous. Vex's expression was grim. They had to discredit you fast before anyone started asking questions about your treatment methods. Before anyone realized you were onto something the palace healers couldn't do. Nira's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat on the table. Who's behind this? That's what we need to find out. Kaylin pulled out a folder from inside his coat. Somehow it had survived the canal and everything after. He spread papers across the table. I have payment records, supply manifests, authorization signatures, but they all trace back to front companies and false names. Whoever's running this operation has covered their tracks well. Except for one thing, Vex said. The research facility needs supplies, rare herbs, specific toxins, experimental compounds, and all of those have to come from somewhere. She pulled out another paper, a list of merchants and supply houses. Several names were circled in red. These are the vendors who've sold large quantities of unusual materials in the past 6 months, Vex continued. Materials that match what would be needed for shadow poison research. Nira scanned the list. Most of the names meant nothing to her, but one jumped out. Merchant Krell's House of Rare Remedies. She'd known Old Man Krell in her palace days. He'd been a respected supplier, if a bit shady. Krell's dead, she said. Died 2 years ago. Are you sure? I treated him for fever myself back when I could still afford his prices. He died 3 days later. Vex and Kaylin exchanged looks. If Krell's dead but his business is still operating, Kaylin said slowly, someone took over his network. Someone with access to his contacts, his supply chains, his secrets, Nira finished. Krell knew where to get anything. Every healer in the palace used him for materials they couldn't source through official channels. So someone kills Krell, takes over his operation, and uses it to supply a shadow poison research program. Vex tapped the table. That's our lead. It's also a trap, Kaylin said. If we go sniffing around Krell's business, whoever's running it will know immediately. Then we don't sniff. We kick the door down. Vex stood, already moving toward the door. I'll gather a team. No. Nira surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. Both of them stopped, looking at her. If you send soldiers, you'll get soldiers' results. Blood and bodies and nothing left to interrogate. So what do you suggest? Vex asked. I go in alone, as a customer. Absolutely not, Kaylin said immediately. Why not? I'm a healer. I need supplies. It's completely natural for me to visit Krell's shop. It's completely natural for them to kill you the moment they realize who you are. They won't realize. It's been 3 years. I've changed. And besides, Nira met his eyes steadily. I'm the only one who would know what questions to ask. What supplies they should have versus what they actually have. I can find out what they're hiding because I know what to look for. Kaylin looked like he wanted to argue more, but their bond pulsed with something complicated. Frustration mixed with respect, mixed with fear. She's right, Vex said. A healer asking questions won't raise flags. A squadron of resistance fighters will. She'll need backup. I'll have people nearby. If things go wrong, we'll pull her out. If things go wrong, she'll be dead before you can react. Then I guess I better make sure things don't go wrong, Nira said. The look Kaylin gave her was equal parts admiration and terror. They spent the next hour preparing. Vex provided clothes that fit better. A hooded cloak to hide Nira's face, and enough coin to actually make purchases. Kaylin insisted on drilling her on escape routes and emergency signals until she wanted to scream. I know how to handle myself, she finally snapped. In the outer ring, maybe. This is different. How is it different? Because He stopped, jaw working. Through their bond, Nira felt the emotion he wasn't saying out loud. Worry, fear. Something deeper that neither of them wanted to name. I'll be careful, she said more softly. That's not enough. It's going to have to be. Krell's House of Rare Remedies occupied a narrow building in the merchant quarter, squeezed between a textile shop and a tea house. The sign was faded but still legible, showing a mortar and pestle wreathed in exotic flowers. Nira pulled her hood up and pushed through the door. The inside was exactly as she remembered. Shelves crammed with bottles and jars, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling, the sharp smell of preservatives and strange chemicals. But the man behind the counter wasn't Krell. He was young, maybe 30, with slicked back hair and eyes that calculated worth in seconds. When he looked at Naira, she saw him categorize and dismiss her in one glance. "We're closing," he said. "I have coin." Naira kept her voice rough, lower than normal. "And I need specific supplies. Come back tomorrow. I'll pay double your usual rate." That got his attention. He straightened, gesturing to the counter. "What do you need?" Naira pulled out a list she'd written. Real ingredients she needed mixed with ones that would tell her what she wanted to know. Bloodroot powder, silver thistle, void-touched nightshade. The man's eyes flickered at void-touched nightshade. Barely visible, but Naira caught it. "That last one is highly regulated," he said carefully. "That's why I'm paying double." "May I ask what you need it for?" "May I ask why you're asking?" They stared at each other. Naira could feel her pulse hammering but kept her expression neutral. Finally, the man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Wait here." He disappeared through a door in the back. Naira used the time to look around more carefully. The shop seemed normal enough, but there were subtle signs. Dust on some bottles, but not others. Shelf space arranged to hide certain sections. A faint chemical smell that didn't match the visible inventory. This place was a front. She'd bet everything on it. The man returned with the wooden box. He set it on the counter and opened it, revealing vials of dark liquid. Void-touched nightshade extract. Very potent. Very expensive. How much? 50 gold pieces per vial. That was highway robbery. Nira made a show of considering, then nodded. "I'll take 3 vials, but I'm going to need a steady supply. Can you guarantee availability?" "That depends on the volume you need." "Significant volume. I'm treating patients with unusual conditions." Another flicker in his eyes. "What kind of conditions?" This was it. The moment where she either got answers or got killed. "Conditions that conventional healers can't treat," Naira said. "Conditions that require methods the palace considers forbidden." The man's smile widened. "I think we might be able to help each other, but these kind of arrangements require references." "How do I know you're not a palace spy?" "Because the palace threw me out 3 years ago for using exactly these kinds of methods." Naira lowered her hood slightly, enough for him to see her face. "My name is Naira Voss. I'm sure you've heard of me." Recognition lit in his eyes, followed immediately by calculation. He knew who she was. He knew what she'd been accused of, and he was deciding whether she was useful or dangerous. "The disgraced healer," he said slowly. "The one who failed to save the queen. The one who tried to save her using forbidden techniques. The one the High Council destroyed for knowing too much. And now you're back in the medical business." "I never left. I just moved to a part of the city where no one cares about the council's rules." The man studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out a piece of paper and wrote something on it. "There's a warehouse in the dock district. This address. Tomorrow night, 2 hours after sunset. Come alone, and we'll discuss larger arrangements." Nira took the paper, memorizing the address before tucking it away. "I'll be there." "I hope so, because if you're lying about who you are, if this is some kind of setup..." His smile went cold. "The people I work for don't like loose ends. They'll kill you slowly, painfully, using methods that would make even a healer scream." "I understand." "Do you?" He leaned closer. The queen screamed. "Did you know that?" When the poison finally took her, she screamed for 3 hours straight. No one could help her. Not even you. Ice flooded Naira's veins. This man knew details that hadn't been made public. Details that only someone directly involved would know. She'd just made contact with the conspiracy. "Tomorrow night," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'll be there." She paid for the nightshade, actual nightshade, not just information, and left the shop. Only when she was 3 streets away did she let herself breathe. Kalen materialized from a doorway, and she nearly punched him in surprise. "I heard everything," he said quietly. Their bond had stretched but not broken. He'd been monitoring the entire exchange. "You got the meeting." "I got a trap," Nira corrected. "That warehouse is going to be full of people ready to kill me the moment I show up." "Then we'll be ready for them." "Kaylin, you were right to do this. You got further in 10 minutes than I did in 3 months." He touched her arm, just briefly. "But now we do this together. You're not walking into that warehouse alone." "They said come alone. They say a lot of things. Doesn't mean we have to listen." Back at the safe house, Vex listened to Nira's report with increasing intensity. "They're getting bold," she said when Nira finished. "Inviting you to a meeting means either they're confident enough not to care or they want to use you for something." "Or both," Kaylin added. "Either way, it's our chance." Vex started pulling out maps of the dock district. "We hit them tomorrow night, hard and fast. Capture whoever's running the operation, get answers, shut them down." "It won't be that simple," Nira said. "If these people have shadow-born creatures, they'll use them. And if they're running experiments on living subjects—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we save whoever we can," Kaylin said firmly, "and make sure the people responsible pay." They planned through the afternoon and into the evening. Vex assembled a team of her best fighters, grim men and women who'd all lost something to the palace's indifference. Kaylin drew diagrams of the warehouse district, marking sight lines and escape routes. And Nira sat quietly, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. "You're scared," Kaylin said softly. He'd found her on the roof as the sun set, watching the city turn orange and gold. "Of course I'm scared. We're about to attack people who create monsters for fun." "You don't have to come. We can handle the fighting." "And who's going to handle the healing?" Nira looked at him. "Those experiments you mentioned. If there are survivors, they'll need immediate treatment. Shadow poison spreads fast. You'll need a healer on site. There are other healers. Not ones who know forbidden techniques. Not ones who've cured shadow poison before." She stood, facing him fully. "This is my fight too, Kaylin. The moment they destroyed my life to cover up their crimes, they made it personal." He studied her face for a long moment. "You've changed. Since the palace. You're harder." "I had to be. The outer ring doesn't reward softness." "No, but it doesn't reward suicide either." He caught her hand. "Promise me something." "What?" "If things go wrong tomorrow, you run. You don't try to be a hero, you just survive." "I'm not leaving you." "Nira, I'm not leaving you," she repeated more firmly. "We're bonded now, remember? I can feel you. If you die, I'll know. I'll feel it happen. So if you're planning some kind of noble sacrifice, you can forget it." Their connection pulsed with emotion, his fear for her fear for him, and underneath it all, something neither had words for yet. "This is a terrible idea," Kaylin said. "Most of the best ideas are." He laughed, short and pained. Then he pulled her into a hug that was probably supposed to be reassuring, but felt more like goodbye. Nira pressed her face into his shoulder and tried not to think about shadow-born creatures, about experiments, about all the ways tomorrow could go catastrophically wrong. Instead, she thought about the Queen, screaming for 3 hours while poison ate her from inside. She thought about 14 missing healers, stolen from the outer ring and used like lab rats. She thought about 3 years of exile, of being called a failure, of watching the system that was supposed to protect people destroy them instead. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we burn it all down." "Tomorrow," Kaylin agreed. Night fell over the city. In the palace district, lights blazed in windows where important people discussed important things. In the outer ring, darkness brought out predators, both human and otherwise. And in a resistant safe house, a disgraced healer and a hunted commander prepared for war. They had no idea that by tomorrow night, the kingdom would never be the same. The warehouse squatted at the edge of the dock district like a diseased tooth. 3 stories of rotting wood and corroded metal, windows broken or boarded over, the smell of old fish and chemicals thick enough to taste. Nira crouched in the shadows across the street, watching for movement while her heart tried to punch through her ribs. 2 hours after sunset, just like the man at Krell's shop had specified. "I count 6 guards on the perimeter," Kaylin whispered from beside her. "Probably twice that inside." "And how many Shadowborn?" "Unknown, but assume at least 2. Nira's hands were shaking. She gripped her herb case tighter, feeling the weight of the forbidden compounds inside. She'd prepared everything she could think of: poisons, antidotes, compounds that might slow shadowborn creatures if they got close enough to use them. It wouldn't be enough. She knew that. But it was all she had. Teams in position. Vex's voice came low from behind them. She'd brought 20 fighters, spread throughout the neighboring buildings and alleys. Not an army, but enough to cause chaos if things went wrong. When things went wrong. Remember the plan, Kaelin said, not for the first time. You go in, verify they have living subjects, then signal us. We breach from 3 sides simultaneously. And if they kill me before I can signal, then we breach anyway and avenge you. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Nira stood, adjusting her cloak. The nightshade vials from Krell's shop clinked softly in her pocket. She'd kept them as props, proof that she was serious about buying in bulk. Kaelin caught her wrist. Through their bond, she felt his fear spike sharp and bright. If you don't come out, he said quietly, I'm coming in. That's a terrible tactical decision. I don't care. Nira wanted to say something meaningful, something that would matter if these were her last words. But all that came out was, don't do anything stupid. Says the woman walking into a death trap. Fair point. She crossed the street before she could change her mind. The warehouse door was ajar, spilling yellow lamplight across dirty cobblestones. Nira stepped through and found herself in a receiving area that looked abandoned. Empty crates, broken equipment, years of accumulated trash. But the dust on the floor showed recent footprints, lots of them. Close the door. Nira spun. The man from Krell's shop emerged from the shadows, still wearing that calculating smile. You came alone, he said. Good. That shows trust. It shows I want to do business. Same thing in our world. He gestured deeper into the warehouse. This way. My employer is eager to meet you. They walked through the ground floor, and Nira cataloged everything. Exits, weapons, anything that might help when Kaelin's team breached. The warehouse was bigger than it looked, stretching back into darkness that the scattered lamps couldn't reach. They climbed stairs to the 2nd floor, and that's when Nira smelled it. Blood. Chemical preservatives. Something else that made her healer's senses recoil. The same wrongness she'd felt in shadow poison, but concentrated, amplified. Through here, the man said, opening a door. The room beyond had been converted into something between a laboratory and a torture chamber. Long tables held glass containers filled with dark liquid. Medical equipment hung from hooks, saws, scalpels, things Nira couldn't identify. And against the far wall, a row of iron cages. There were people in those cages. Nira's breath caught. She counted 7 figures, all in various states of consciousness. Some were slumped against the bars. Others rocked slowly, muttering to themselves. All of them bore the telltale black veins of shadow poison spreading across their skin. The missing healers, she whispered. Some of them. A new voice, refined and cold. A woman stepped out from behind the equipment, tall, silver-haired, wearing robes that marked her as palace nobility. The others didn't survive the optimization process. Nira knew that face. Everyone who'd worked in the palace knew that face. Magistrate Alara, she said, feeling ice spread through her veins. You're behind this. Alara had been the queen's chief advisor, the 2nd most powerful person in the kingdom. She'd sat in on Nira's trial, had voted to strip her title, had called her methods barbaric and dangerous. And now here she stood, surrounded by cages full of poisoned people. Behind it, Alara smiled. My dear, I created it. The shadow poison research, the optimization protocols, the entire program. It was my vision from the beginning. You killed the queen. I elevated the queen to martyrdom. She was weak, sentimental, talking about reforms that would have destroyed everything our ancestors built. Someone had to protect the kingdom from her foolishness. Nira's mind raced. She needed to signal Kaelin, needed to get him and Vex's team moving before... Don't bother, Alara said casually. Your friends outside are already dead. What? Did you really think we didn't know about the resistance? About Captain Vex and her little band of malcontents? Alara gestured, and more figures emerged from the darkness. Shadow-born creatures, at least 6 of them, their eyeless faces turning toward Nira. We've been tracking them for months. This was the perfect opportunity to eliminate them all at once. Through the bond, Nira felt Kalen's spike of alarm, then pain, then nothing. The bond went silent. "No," Nira whispered. "Yes. My Shadowborn are quite efficient." Alara moved closer. "But don't worry, you won't have time to mourn. You're far too valuable for that." "I'm not helping you." "Oh, but you already did. When you cured Commander Drax of shadow poison, you demonstrated techniques we've been trying to develop for years. Forbidden methods that actually work." Alara's eyes gleamed. "We need those techniques. We need you to teach us, to refine the process, to help us create something perfect." "You're insane." "I'm pragmatic. The kingdom is weak, divided, rotting from within. The old hierarchies that kept us strong are crumbling. Someone needs to restore order, and that requires tools. Weapons. Methods that work regardless of sentiment or morality." She gestured to the caged healers. "These people are helping create a new world. You should be honored to join them." Nira looked at the prisoners again, at their hollow eyes, their poisoned veins, the way they'd been reduced to test subjects for Alara's experiments. This was what happened when healing became weaponized, when knowledge became torture. "I'd rather die," Nira said. "That can be arranged. But first," Alara nodded to the man from Krell's shop. "Show her what happens to those who refuse to cooperate." The man opened one of the cages and dragged out a woman who might have been 40 or 70. Her face was too destroyed to tell. He threw her on the floor at Naira's feet. "This was Healer Marin," Alara said. "She tried to resist, tried to refuse treatment protocols. So we let the shadow poison run its course without intervention. This is day 14 of infection." The woman on the floor wasn't really a woman anymore. The black veins covered her entire body, and her skin had started to crack, revealing something dark and viscous underneath. When she opened her mouth, no sound came out, just a hiss like escaping steam. "By day 20, Alara continued, she'll be fully transformed, another shadowborn creature for our collection. Unless, of course, someone intervenes with the proper treatment, someone with forbidden knowledge." Naira stared at the dying woman. 14 days meant the poison had reached her brain, her organs, everything. Conventional healing said she was already dead. But Naira had stopped believing in conventional healing 3 years ago. "You want me to save her," Naira said slowly. "I want you to demonstrate your methods so we can replicate them. Save her or let her die. Either outcome provides valuable data. And if I refuse, then we move to the next subject. We have 6 more caged healers after all, plus whatever survivors are left from tonight's resistance purge." Alara's smile was knife-sharp. "Eventually, you'll cooperate. Everyone does." Naira's mind was racing. Kalen's bond was still silent. She couldn't tell if he was unconscious or dead. Vex's team was supposedly eliminated. She was alone in a warehouse full of shadowborn creatures and palace conspirators. But she wasn't helpless. She knelt beside the dying woman, placing her hands on the cracked skin. The wrongness hit her immediately. This poison was far more advanced than what had infected Kalen. It had integrated itself into every cell, rewriting the woman's biology from the inside out. Saving her would require something extreme, something dangerous, something that might kill them both. Nira made her choice. "I'll need my herb case," she said. Alara nodded, and someone tossed the case to her. Nira caught it, fingers already moving to the hidden compartment in the bottom, the one where she kept the truly forbidden substances. Crystal powder from the Voidlands themselves, ground bone from creatures that shouldn't exist, and a single vial of her own blood, treated with compounds that made it toxic to shadow poison. She'd prepared this mixture 3 years ago, right after the Queen died. A last resort that she'd never used because the risk was too high. But the Queen had screamed for 3 hours. This woman wouldn't. Nira mixed the components quickly, feeling Alara's hungry gaze on her back. The magistrate thought she was watching a demonstration, learning secrets to weaponize. She had no idea what was about to happen. "This will hurt," Nira told the dying woman, "but it will be fast." She pressed the mixture to the woman's lips, forcing it past her teeth. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The woman convulsed, back arching, and the shadow poison inside her body suddenly ignited. Not with fire, with light. Pure, searing light that burned through her veins like lightning, consuming the darkness from inside. But it didn't stop there. The light spread, leaping from the woman to the nearest shadow-born creature. The creature shrieked, a sound like tearing metal, and started to dissolve, its borrowed flesh unable to withstand whatever Naira had unleashed. "What did you do?" Ilara screamed. Nira stood, feeling power surge through her body. The mixture she'd created wasn't just medicine, it was transformation. It turned healing itself into a weapon against shadow poison, creating a chain reaction that spread through anything touched by the Voidlands. And this warehouse was full of shadow-born creatures. "I'm doing what I should have done 3 years ago," Naira said. "I'm finishing the treatment." The light spread faster, jumping from creature to creature. They tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. One by one, they fell, dissolving into smoke and screaming. Ilara bolted for the door. Naira let her go. She had bigger problems. The caged healers were all infected with shadow poison. When the light reached them, it would either purify them or kill them, and Naira had no way to control which. She ran to the nearest cage, ripping it open. The man inside was barely conscious, his veins black as ink. "Stay with me," she said, pressing her hands to his chest. Through her palms, she felt the light trying to consume him, trying to burn away everything tainted by shadow. So she pushed back. It was instinct, not knowledge. Naira had no training for this, no precedent, but she had the bond with Kaelin, still silent, still terrifying in its absence. And she understood now what that bond meant, power balanced, not dominated. She didn't try to control the light or stop it. She guided it, showed it what to preserve and what to destroy, healing and purification working together instead of against each other. The man gasped, his eyes clearing. The black veins faded. "Can you stand?" Nira asked. He nodded weakly. "Then help me with the others." They moved through the cages fast. Not all of them survived. 2 were too far gone, their bodies collapsing as the light touched them. But 4 made it, stumbling out of their prisons while the warehouse burned with invisible fire. Nira led them toward the stairs. Behind them, the last shadow-born creature fell, its death scream echoing through the building. They reached the ground floor and found chaos. Ilara's guards were fighting something. Nira's heart leapt when she realized it was Vex's resistance fighters. They weren't dead. They'd survived whatever ambush had been planned. And in the middle of the battle, moving like death itself, was Kaelin. The bond flared back to life, and Naira felt his rage, his fear, his desperate relief at sensing her alive. "Naira!" he roared, cutting down a guard. "Get everyone out!" she screamed back. "The building's not stable." It was true. The light had burned through more than just shadow-born creatures. The walls were cracking, the floor buckling, the entire structure groaning like a dying animal. Vex appeared at Nira's side, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. "What the hell did you do?" "Something stupid. Move!" They ran for the exit, the rescued healers stumbling between them. Behind them, the warehouse started to collapse, walls folding inward with sounds like breaking bones. They burst out into the street and kept running, putting distance between themselves and the dying building. When they finally stopped, gasping for breath, Nira turned to count survivors. Vex and 11 of her fighters, 4 rescued healers, Kaelin, covered in blood but alive, and no sign of Magistrate Ilara. "She got away," Nira said. "Then we hunt her down." Kaelin's voice was hard. "She can't hide from this." "She won't have to," Vex pointed. Palace guards were flooding into the dock district, dozens of them, with more coming. Someone had sounded the alarm. "We need to move," Vex said. "Now!" They scattered into the maze of alleys, splitting into small groups. Kaelin grabbed Naira's hand, pulling her through passages she'd never seen before, always moving, never stopping. Behind them, the warehouse finally collapsed completely, sending up a pillar of dust and smoke that could probably be seen from the palace itself. They found shelter in an abandoned factory, barricading themselves in while shouts echoed outside. Kaelin pressed against the door, breathing hard, while Naira slumped against a wall. "You're alive," he said. "You too." The bond went silent. "I thought—" "I know. Me too." They stared at each other across the darkness. Then Kaelin crossed the space between them and pulled her into a kiss that was more desperation than romance, more relief than passion. When they broke apart, Naira was shaking. "We just declared war on the palace," she said. "Yes. Alara's going to spin this. She'll say we're terrorists, traitors, anything to avoid blame. Probably. We can't win this." "Maybe not." Kaelin touched her face gently. "But we can make sure the truth comes out. We have witnesses now, 4 healers who survived Alara's experiments. Whatever happens next, people will know what she did. That's not enough." "It's a start." Outside, the sounds of pursuit were getting closer. They had maybe minutes before the guards found this hiding spot. Nira pulled out the journal she'd been keeping since her exile. 3 years of forbidden techniques, experimental treatments, everything she'd learned that the palace said was impossible. "Take this," she said, pressing it into Kaelin's hands. "If I don't make it, don't." "If I don't make it," she continued firmly, "someone needs to know this information is real. That healing can evolve beyond what the palace teaches. Promise me." "I promise. But you're going to make it." "How can you be sure?" "Because I'm not letting you go." He pulled her close again. "We're bonded, remember? Where you go, I go. So if you're planning some noble sacrifice, I'm not leaving you," Nira said, echoing his words from before. "We finish this together." The door shuddered. Someone was trying to break through. Kaelin drew his sword. Nira reached for her herb case. They stood back to back, feeling their bond pulse strong and steady between them, ready to face whatever came through that door. Then a voice called out, familiar, unexpected, "Stand down! They're with me!" The door opened, and there, flanked by royal guards wearing the king's personal colors, stood someone Nira never expected to see again. Prince Jaren, the queen's younger brother, heir to the throne. He looked at Nira with eyes full of grief and understanding. "My sister," he said quietly, "sent me a letter before she died. She said if anything happened to her, I should find you. She said you were the only healer who knew the truth." Naira's legs nearly gave out. "She knew? The queen knew she was being poisoned?" "She suspected, but she couldn't prove it, couldn't trust anyone in the palace, so she wrote to me in secret." Jaren stepped into the factory, and his guards fanned out, securing the space. "I've been investigating for 3 years, and tonight, when that warehouse lit up, I knew something had finally broken open." "Magistrate Alara is behind everything," Kaelin said. "She murdered the queen. She's creating shadowborn creatures. She's experimenting on healers." "I know." Jaren's expression was grim. "I've known for months, but I couldn't move against her without proof. She's too powerful, too connected. Half the High Council is loyal to her." "So what changed?" Naira asked. "You did. When you destroyed that warehouse, when you saved those healers using forbidden techniques, you proved that the old ways are broken, that the system Alara represents is built on lies." Jaren met her eyes steadily. "My sister died believing you could change everything. I'm here to make sure she was right. The king is aware, and he's ready to listen. But you need to come with me now, both of you, before Alara consolidates power and spins this into something we can't fight." Naira looked at Kaelin. Through their bond, she felt his cautious hope. "This could be a trap," she said. "Everything's a trap these days," Kaelin replied. "Might as well walk into one that offers a chance of survival." Jaren gestured to his guards. "You'll be under my personal protection. No one touches you without going through me first. And tomorrow, we present the evidence before the full court. No more secrets, no more cover-ups, just truth." It was exactly what Naira had wanted 3 years ago. A chance to be heard, a chance to prove she'd been right all along. But 3 years in the outer ring had taught her that truth didn't always win, that powerful people could twist anything to their advantage. Still, what choice did they have? "If this goes wrong," Naira started, "then we die exposing the corruption instead of hiding from it," Kaelin finished. "I'm fine with that." "Of course you are. You're insane." "So are you. That's why this works." Nira wanted to argue, but he was right. They were both insane. They'd have to be, to think they could take on the entire palace establishment and win. She took Kaelin's hand. Then she looked at Prince Jaren. "Lead the way," she said. "Let's go burn down your kingdom." Jaren smiled grimly. "My sister would have liked you." They left the factory surrounded by royal guards, moving through streets that were suddenly filled with soldiers. Word had spread fast. A battle in the dock district. A warehouse destroyed, forbidden healing techniques unleashed. The city was waking up to something it couldn't ignore. As they approached the palace, Naira felt the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow she'd stand before the High Council again, before the same people who'd destroyed her life 3 years ago. Only this time, she wasn't a lone healer making desperate claims. She had proof. She had witnesses. She had a bonded alpha standing beside her. And she had absolutely nothing left to lose. The palace gates opened, swallowing them into light and gold and ancient power. Naira gripped Kalen's hand tighter and walked forward into the heart of everything that had tried to kill her. One way or another, by tomorrow night, the kingdom would be changed forever. The palace felt like walking into a cage made of gold and marble. Naira hadn't been through these corridors in 3 years, but muscle memory guided her feet even as her stomach churned. Every guard they passed watched her with suspicion or recognition or both. Whispers followed them like smoke. "Ignore them," Kalen murmured beside her. "Hard to ignore people who want you dead." "You've had 3 years of practice." "Fair point." Prince Jaren led them through passages Naira had never seen during her palace days. Private routes meant for royalty, not healers. They climbed stairs that spiraled higher than she remembered the palace having, until finally Jaren stopped before an ornate door guarded by 4 soldiers wearing the king's personal crest. "Wait here," Jaren said. "I need to speak with my uncle alone first." "Your uncle?" Naira blinked. "The king is your uncle?" "My mother married into the royal line. The queen was my half-sister. It's complicated." Jaren's expression softened briefly. She used to say palace politics made warfare look simple. She wasn't wrong. He disappeared through the door, leaving them in the corridor with guards, who definitely looked ready to kill them if they moved wrong. Naira leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline from the warehouse was fading, leaving behind aches and terror and the delayed realization that she'd nearly died at least 4 times tonight. "You're shaking," Kalen said quietly. "I'm tired." "You're terrified." "That too." She closed her eyes. What if this doesn't work? What if Alara spins the story first, convinces the king we're the real threat? Then we fight. We can't fight the entire palace. We can try. Nira opened her eyes to look at him. This alpha who'd been raised in privilege, who could have stood silent 3 years ago and protected his position, who instead chose to investigate a conspiracy that nearly got him killed. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "About truth, about justice, all of it. You're palace-born. This system has given you everything." Kalen was quiet for a long moment. "My mother was Omega," he said finally. "She died when I was 7. The palace healers said it was natural causes, that her heart just gave out. But I remember her being sick for weeks, remember her telling my father something was wrong, that she needed different treatment. They didn't listen. They said she was being hysterical, that Omega physiology was too delicate for aggressive interventions. So they gave her rest and herbs and prayer, and she died slowly while they all congratulated themselves on following proper protocol." The bitter edge in his voice matched Naira's own wounds. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was too young to fight them then. But when the queen died, when you tried to explain that conventional methods wouldn't work..." He met her eyes. "I heard my mother's voice, saw it happening again, and I couldn't stay silent anymore." "You did stay silent. At my trial." "I know, and I've regretted it every day since." His hand found hers. "I'm done being silent." The door opened. Jaren gestured them inside. The king's private study was smaller than Nira expected. No throne, no crowd of advisors, just an old man sitting behind a desk covered in papers and maps. King Aldrich looked nothing like the imposing figure she remembered from state ceremonies. He looked tired, worn down, like someone who'd carried too much weight for too long. "Healer Voss," he said, and his voice was rough. 3 years ago, I let my council convince me you were responsible for my wife's death. I signed the order that stripped your title and exiled you to the outer ring." Naira's jaw tightened. "Yes, Your Majesty." "I was wrong." The words hung in the air, impossible and real at the same time. "My nephew has shown me evidence," Aldrich continued. "Documents, testimonies, proof that my wife was murdered by someone I trusted. Someone I elevated to power because I believed in her vision for the kingdom." His hands clenched on the desk. Magistrate Alara poisoned my wife. She's been creating weapons from shadow poison. She's experimenting on my subjects, and I was too blind to see it. You weren't blind, Jaren said quietly. You were being manipulated. Alara controlled the information you received, the advisors you trusted. She built a wall around you. That's no excuse. A king should see through manipulation. Aldrich looked at Naira. You tried to tell the truth. You used methods that might have saved her, and we destroyed you for it. Nira didn't know what to say. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times in the outer ring, the king admitting he was wrong, apologizing, offering to restore what she'd lost. In her fantasies, it had felt like vindication. In reality, it just felt hollow. With respect, Your Majesty, she said carefully, apologies don't undo 3 years of exile. They don't bring back the healers Alara murdered. They don't stop the shadowborn creatures she's created. No, they don't. Aldrich stood, and despite his age, there was steel in his spine. But action can. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an emergency session of the High Council. You will present your evidence before the entire court, the experiments, the conspiracy, everything. And I will personally ensure that justice is served. Alara won't sit quietly for that, Kaelin said. She has allies, resources, shadowborn creatures at her command. The moment she realizes what's happening, she'll strike. Let her strike. My personal guard will be ready. Aldrich's eyes hardened. I've spent 3 years being a weak king, paralyzed by grief and manipulation. That ends tonight. And if the council doesn't believe us, Nira asked, half of them are probably in Alara's pocket. Then I'll remove them too. Jaren will be crowned within the month, and he can rebuild the council from scratch if necessary. Aldrich looked at his nephew. You've been preparing for this. Ever since I got my sister's letter, Jaren confirmed. I have lists of loyalists, plans for restructuring, everything needed to stabilize the kingdom if the current system collapses. It won't just collapse, Naira said. It'll burn. When people find out the High Council allowed experiments on healers, that they created shadowborn creatures, there will be riots. Good. The king's voice was flat. Let them burn what's rotten. We'll rebuild from the ashes. Naira had never heard a monarch talk like this. Kings were supposed to preserve order, maintain stability. This was revolution from the throne itself. You'll need more than political reforms, she said slowly. You'll need to change how healing works in this kingdom. The techniques I used tonight, the forbidden methods that saved those healers, they need to be taught, legitimized, made available to everyone, not kept secret. You want to rewrite the medical establishment, Aldrich said. I want to stop pretending the old ways are the only ways. The palace healers are excellent at what they do, but they're limited by doctrine that's centuries old. There's so much more we could accomplish if we were allowed to experiment, to evolve. That will terrify people. The council, the traditional healers, they'll fight you. Let them fight. I'm not backing down anymore. Aldrich studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, grim but genuine. My wife told me once that you were the most stubborn healer she'd ever met. She meant it as a compliment. Something in Nira's chest cracked. I tried so hard to save her. I know, and if I'd listened to you instead of the council, she might still be alive. The king sat back down heavily. I can't change the past, but I can make sure her death wasn't meaningless. Tomorrow, we expose everything, and then we start building something better. What do you need from us? Kaelin asked. Tonight, rest. You're both exhausted, and tomorrow will require strength. Jaren moved toward another door. I've prepared chambers for you. Secure, private. No one will disturb you. What about Alara? Naira asked. She's still out there. Let her run. Every hour she spends hiding is an hour we spend gathering support. Jaren's expression was hard. By morning, she'll have nowhere left to go. They were led to chambers that were absurdly luxurious compared to Naira's shed in the outer ring. Soft beds, hot water, clean clothes. It felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. Kaelin paced the room while Naira sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything. This is happening, she said. We're actually doing this. Having second thoughts? Constantly. But I'm out of better options. Kaelin stopped pacing and knelt in front of her, taking her hands. You know what tomorrow means. Even if everything goes perfectly, even if we expose Alara and reform the medical system, nothing goes back to how it was before. I don't want it to go back. The way it was before destroyed people. I mean for you specifically. If the king restores your title, if you become a palace healer again, I won't, Naira said firmly. I can't work in that system anymore. Not after everything I've learned, everything I've seen. She met his eyes. If we're really rebuilding things, I want to create something new. A place where healers can learn forbidden techniques alongside traditional ones. Where we study what works instead of what's approved. A new academy. Something like that. Assuming we survive tomorrow. We'll survive. Kaylin's grip on her hands tightened. I won't let anything happen to you. You can't promise that. I just did. Naira wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. Through their bond, she felt the absolute certainty of his commitment. Not blind faith, but a choice made and held to regardless of cost. You're an idiot, she said softly. So you keep telling me. And I'm probably an idiot for trusting you. Definitely. She pulled him up onto the bed beside her. They lay there in the darkness, not sleeping, just existing in the same space while the palace hummed around them with danger and possibility. What happens after? Kaylin asked quietly. After tomorrow. After everything changes. What do you want? Naira thought about it. 3 years ago, she would have said she wanted her old life back. Her title, her respect, her place in the palace hierarchy. Now that all felt impossibly small. I want to heal people, she said. Really heal them, not just treat symptoms according to approved protocols. I want to teach healers that there's more than one right way. And I want... She paused, feeling vulnerable saying it out loud. I want to do it with you beside me. Not as healer and alpha, but as equals. Through the bond, she felt Kaylin's surge of emotion, joy mixed with fear, mixed with hope. That's what the bond means, he said. Power balanced, not dominated. I've never wanted anything else. Liar. Every alpha wants dominance. Not this one. He pulled her closer. This one just wants you alive and fighting and changing the world. They fell asleep tangled together, the bond humming steadily between them, while outside the palace prepared for war. Dawn came too fast and too bright. Naira woke to find Jaren already in the room, fully dressed in ceremonial robes. The High Council convenes in 1 hour, he said. The 4 rescued healers are ready to testify. We have your journal, Kaylin's evidence, everything we need. Are you ready? Naira's stomach was trying to eat itself. No? Good. That means you're smart. Jaren handed her a set of robes. Not healer's robes, but something else. Simple, practical, marked with an emblem Naira didn't recognize. These are for you. They represent no guild, no faction, just the pursuit of truth. Dramatic. My sister would have appreciated it. The hour passed in a blur of preparation. Vex arrived with 2 of her fighters. Somehow they'd made it into the palace. The 4 rescued healers looked terrified but determined. Kaylin checked his weapons 3 times. And then it was time. The council chamber was exactly as Naira remembered. Vast, circular, with seats rising in tiers around a central floor. Every member of the High Council was present, along with nobles, military commanders, and representatives from the major guilds. Magistrate Alara sat in her usual seat, calm and composed, wearing robes that probably cost more than Naira's entire shed. This should be interesting, Alara said as they entered. The disgraced healer returns. Tell me, Voss, have you come to apologize for your failures? Naira wanted to spit in her face. Instead, she walked to the center of the chamber and stood tall. King Aldrich rose from his throne. This emergency session is called to address allegations of conspiracy, murder, and crimes against the kingdom. Healer Naira Voss will present evidence. Evidence? Alara laughed. Your Majesty, this woman is a convicted failure who was exiled for incompetence. Why are we wasting the council's time? Because I was right. Naira's voice rang clear through the chamber. 3 years ago, I told this council that the queen was poisoned with shadow toxin, that conventional healing wouldn't work, that we needed to try experimental methods. You called me hysterical, you stripped my title, you threw me into the outer ring to die quietly. You failed to save the queen, another council member said. That's fact. I failed because you stopped me from finishing the treatment, but I didn't fail last night. Nira gestured to the 4 rescued healers. These people were poisoned with the same toxin. They should be dead or transformed into shadowborn creatures. Instead, they're standing here, because I used the forbidden techniques you claimed were impossible. Impossible? Alara's composure cracked slightly. You used dark methods, Voss. Dangerous methods. Methods that could have killed them. But didn't. Unlike your methods, which killed 14 healers and counting. Nira pulled out her journal, holding it up. This contains documentation of every treatment, every technique, every forbidden compound I've used in 3 years. It works. It saves lives. And the only reason it's forbidden is because the council is too afraid to admit they don't know everything. This is absurd, Alara snapped. She stood, addressing the king directly. Your Majesty, this woman is clearly disturbed. She destroys a warehouse, kills dozens of guards, and now makes wild accusations. The warehouse belonged to you. Kalen's voice cut through the chamber. He stepped forward, pulling out documents. These are property records showing Magistrate Alara purchased it 6 months ago through a front company. These are shipping manifests showing deliveries of rare toxins and medical equipment. And these, he held up papers that made Alara go pale, are authorizations signed by you for the acquisition of living test subjects. The chamber erupted in noise. Council members shouting, nobles gasping, everyone talking at once. Silence! Aldrich's voice cracked like thunder. Magistrate Alara, you will answer these charges. They're lies. Forgeries created by traitors. They're notarized documents from the royal archives. Jaren stepped forward. I've spent 3 years investigating. Every piece of evidence has been verified. You murdered my sister. You created shadowborn creatures. You experimented on healers. And you did it all while sitting in judgment of people like Nira Voss. I did it for the kingdom. Alara's composure finally shattered completely. Do you think this realm survives on sentiment, on mercy? We need weapons. We need control. We need... You needed power, Nira said quietly, and you were willing to kill anyone who threatened it. I was willing to do what was necessary. Alara looked around the chamber at the shocked faces. All of you benefited from my work. The stability, the security. Do you think that came from being soft? From allowing healers to experiment freely? Someone had to maintain order. By creating monsters, Kalen said. By protecting the kingdom from its own weakness. You killed my wife, Aldrich said, and his voice was death itself. You sat at my table. You counseled me through grief, and all the while you were the one who'd put poison in her veins. She was going to destroy everything, her reforms, her compassion. It would have torn the kingdom apart. So you tore it apart instead. Guards moved toward Alara. She raised her hand, and suddenly the air in the chamber changed, thickened, darkened. Don't, she said softly. Shadowborn creatures materialized from the darkness behind council members, their eyeless faces turning toward the guards. There were at least 10 of them, maybe more. I gave the kingdom strength, Alara said. I gave it weapons. And if you try to arrest me, I'll show you exactly what those weapons can do. The chamber descended into chaos. Nobles screaming, council members fleeing, guards drawing weapons against creatures that shouldn't exist. Kalen moved to defend the king, but Nira grabbed his arm. Wait, she said. She walked toward Alara calmly, feeling the shadowborn creatures focus on her. Through her bond with Kalen, she channeled strength, and in her herb case, she carried 1 more vial of the mixture that had destroyed the warehouse. You can't control them, Nira said. Not really. Shadowborn creatures aren't weapons. They're corrupted people, and corruption can be purified. You're bluffing. Am I? Nira uncapped the vial. The light that spilled out was small, barely visible, but every shadowborn creature in the room recoiled. This is what happens when healing evolves, Nira said. When we stop limiting ourselves to approved methods and start actually solving problems. I can cure shadow poison. I can reverse the transformation. And if you don't stand down right now, I'll prove it by taking away every weapon you have. Alara's face twisted with rage and fear. You're one healer. I have an army. You had an army. Nira tipped the vial, letting a single drop fall. The effect was immediate. Light exploded through the chamber, jumping from one shadow-born creature to the next. They shrieked and dissolved, their borrowed forms unable to withstand purification. Alara tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Kaelin caught her, slamming her to the ground. "It's over," he said. The light faded. The shadow-born creatures were gone, and in the sudden silence, every person in the chamber stared at Naira. She stood in the center of the room, exhausted and terrified and more powerful than she'd ever been. "The old system failed," she said to the High Council. "It failed the Queen. It failed me. It failed every healer who's been held back by doctrine instead of encouraged to grow. If we're going to survive, if this kingdom is going to be more than just another corrupt empire, we need to change. We need to admit that knowledge evolves, that healing evolves, that people deserve better than tradition for tradition's sake." King Aldrich rose slowly. For a moment, Naira thought he might argue, might defend the system he'd presided over. Instead, he bowed. The gesture was small but unmistakable. The king, bowing to a disgraced healer in front of the entire High Council. "You're right," he said. "Everything needs to change, starting now." He gestured to his guards. "Arrest Magistrate Alara. Hold her for trial on charges of regicide, conspiracy, and crimes against the kingdom." As Alara was dragged away, still screaming about betrayal and necessity, Aldrich turned to face his council. "Healer Voss has proven something we refuse to see. Our methods are incomplete. Our knowledge is limited, and our pride has cost lives." He looked at Naira. "I'm establishing a new institution, an academy for advanced healing techniques. Traditional and experimental methods taught side by side, with the goal of saving lives however we can. And I want you to lead it." Naira's knees almost gave out. "Your Majesty, you're the only one qualified. You've proven that forbidden techniques work. You've saved lives the palace healers said were lost. And more than that," his voice softened, "you never stopped fighting for what was right, even when it cost you everything." Around the chamber, Naira saw faces, some hostile, some shocked, some thoughtful. Change wouldn't come easy. Half these people would fight her every step, but some wouldn't, and that was enough. "I'll do it," she said. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "No more executions for using unapproved techniques. No more exiling healers who question doctrine. And full autonomy for the academy. I won't have my curriculum dictated by people who think knowledge stopped evolving centuries ago." Several council members sputtered in outrage. Aldrich silenced them with a gesture. "Granted," he said. "All of it." Naira looked at Kaelin, at Jaren, at the rescued healers who'd survived Alara's experiments. She thought about old Mira coughing in the outer ring, about 3 years of exile, about the Queen screaming while conventional healing failed her. "Then we start immediately," she said. "There's a lot of work to do." The High Council session ended in chaos. Angry debates, political maneuvering, the beginning of restructuring that would take months. But through it all, one thing was clear. The old system was broken, and for the first time in 3 years, Naira Voss had the power to build something better. The morning after Alara's arrest, Naira stood on the balcony overlooking the city and realized she had no idea how to build an academy. She knew how to survive. She knew how to heal using methods that terrified most people. She knew how to fight corruption and expose conspiracies. But creating an institution from nothing, teaching others what she'd learned through desperation and exile, that was different. "You're thinking too loud," Kaelin said from behind her. "I can feel it through the bond." "I don't know what I'm doing." "Good. That means you're honest about it." He joined her at the railing. "The king has allocated funding, a building in the Eastern Quarter, and permission to recruit whoever you want. That's more than most people get when starting something new. It's not enough. I need healers willing to learn forbidden techniques. I need teachers who won't run back to the High Council the moment things get difficult. I need—" She stopped, overwhelmed. "You need help," Kaelin finished, "so ask for it." "From who? Half the palace wants me dead, and the other half thinks I'm a dangerous radical." "Then recruit dangerous radicals. The outer ring is full of them." Naira looked at him sharply. "The palace will never accept healers from the outer ring." "They accepted you, eventually." "That's different." "How?" She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right. 3 years ago, she'd have said outer ring healers were untrained, Unqualified. Too crude for palace work. Now she knew better. Some of the most skilled practitioners she'd met in exile would never have survived palace scrutiny. Too willing to experiment. Too quick to discard methods that didn't work. Exactly the kind of people she needed. "I'm going back," she said suddenly. "Back where?" "To the outer ring. If I'm building something new, I need to recruit from everywhere, not just the people the palace already approves of." She turned to face him. "Will you come with me?" "Do you really need to ask?" They left before noon, slipping out through side gates while the palace churned with political restructuring. Prince Jaren had given them 3 weeks to establish the academy before the formal announcement. 3 weeks to find staff, develop curriculum, and prove this wasn't just a beautiful failure waiting to happen. No pressure. The outer ring looked the same as always: grimy streets, desperate people, the constant smell of rot and survival. But now Nira saw it differently. Not as a punishment, but as a place that had taught her everything the palace couldn't. Her old shed was still standing, barely. Someone else had claimed it, a young man who bolted when he saw Nira approaching. "Wait," she called. "I'm not here to take it back." The man stopped, wary. He was maybe 20, thin as a rail, with healer's hands stained from herb work. "You're the one," he said, "the disgraced healer who saved Commander Drax, who destroyed Magistrate Alara." That's one version of the story. Is it true? That you used forbidden techniques? That you cured shadow poison? Yes. The young man's eyes went bright with hunger, the same hunger Nira had felt in her early palace days, before they'd beaten the curiosity out of her with doctrine and tradition. "Teach me," he said. "I don't even know your name." "Ren. I've been practicing medicine in the ring for 2 years, mostly stitching wounds and setting bones, but I've experimented with other things. Compounds the guild would never approve." He stepped closer. "I want to learn real healing, the kind that works." Nira studied him. Ren was rough around the edges, probably had no formal training, and would horrify every traditional healer in the palace. Perfect. "I'm starting an academy," she said, "for healers who want to learn experimental techniques alongside traditional ones. It won't be comfortable. Half the kingdom will hate you for attending, and the work will be dangerous." "Where do I sign up?" "You just did." Nira pulled out a piece of paper, one of many Jaren had given her for recruitment. "Report to the Eastern Quarter in 2 weeks. Bring whatever medical knowledge you have and be ready to have everything challenged." Ren took the paper like it was made of gold. They found 3 more outer ring healers that afternoon. A middle-aged woman who'd been exiled for performing surgery the guild said was too risky. An old man who'd spent 40 years developing herbal compounds that actually worked but violated approved formulas. And a pair of sisters who'd taught themselves anatomy by studying bodies no one else would touch. All of them said yes immediately. "This is a start," Kaelin said as they walked back toward the palace. "But you'll need more than 5 outer ring healers. You need credibility. Palace-trained people who'll give legitimacy to the program. No one from the palace will join. They think I'm insane." Not all of them. He was right. Over the next week, Nira received 3 visitors at the Eastern Quarter building. The first was Master Physician Torin, an elderly healer who'd taught Nira in her early palace years. He walked through the empty academy with sharp eyes, examining every room. "This is ambitious," he said finally. "Too ambitious?" "Probably." He turned to face her. "I voted to exile you 3 years ago. I believed the High Council when they said you'd failed through incompetence. I was wrong." Nira hadn't expected that. "Why are you here?" "Because I'm 83 years old, and I've spent 60 years teaching the same methods my teachers taught me, the same methods their teachers taught them." Torin's expression was pained. "I thought that was loyalty, honoring tradition. But watching you cure shadow poison, seeing techniques work that we said were impossible, I realized it was cowardice, fear of being wrong. Master Torin, I want to help, if you'll have me." He met her eyes steadily. "I can teach traditional methods, provide the foundation that every healer needs. But more than that, I want to learn. I want to see these forbidden techniques, understand why they work, maybe even contribute to developing new ones." Nira felt something unlock in her chest. "You're serious." "I'm old, Voss. Too old to waste time on pride. Teach me something new before I die. She hired him on the spot. The second visitor was Captain Vex, which surprised Naira less. I hear you're recruiting, Vex said, scanning the building with tactical precision. You'll need security. The traditionalists aren't going to love what you're doing here. I can't pay much. I don't want payment. I want to make sure the people trying to change this kingdom don't get murdered in their sleep. Vex's scarred face was serious. You saved my fighters in that warehouse. Let me return the favor. By becoming Academy security? By making sure your students can learn without worrying about assassins. The Resistance has been fighting the palace's corruption for years. This academy, it's exactly what we were fighting for. Nira added Vex to the growing list of staff. The third visitor was the biggest surprise. Healer Marin, the woman Naira had pulled from Alara's cage, the one who'd been 14 days into shadow poison transformation, walked into the academy looking stronger than she had any right to be. I'm alive because of you, Marin said without preamble. You saved me when I was more shadow than human. That's not healing, that's resurrection. I just used the right techniques. You used techniques no one else would try. You risked your life to save someone you'd never met. Marin's eyes were fierce. I was a palace healer once, before Alara took me. I know traditional medicine inside and out, and I want to help you teach something better. You should rest, recover. After what you went through, after what I went through, I know exactly how important this work is. Marin stepped closer. Let me help, please. By the end of 2 weeks, Naira had assembled a staff of 12, 5 from the outer ring, 4 from the palace, Vex and 2 of her fighters for security. It was a strange mix of backgrounds and methods, and they argued constantly about everything. It was exactly what she'd hoped for. The building itself was a former merchant's hall, 3 stories with enough space for classrooms, treatment rooms, and a laboratory. Naira spent days organizing supplies, traditional herbs next to forbidden compounds, approved texts next to her personal journal of experimental techniques. This place is chaos, Kaylin observed, watching her work. Good. The palace is too orderly, too rigid. Here, we figure things out as we go. And if you fail, then we fail trying something new instead of succeeding at something broken. Prince Jaren visited 2 days before the formal opening. He walked through the academy slowly, taking in the strange mix of palace and outer ring healers working together. The High Council is having fits, he said. Half of them want to shut you down before you even open. Let them try. My uncle won't let them. But you need to understand, this academy is already a political target. Every mistake you make, every patient you lose will be used as proof that experimental healing is dangerous. Traditional healing loses patients all the time. They just blame the patient instead of the method. Fair point. Jaren stopped at a window overlooking the training room where Master Torin was teaching the outer ring healers basic anatomy. My sister would have loved this. She always said the palace needed to change, that we were too stuck in old ways. She just never got the chance to fight for it. She's the reason I'm still fighting, Naira said quietly. I keep thinking about her last words to me. She said, "Don't let them make you small." I didn't understand then, but now you're building something that refuses to be small. Now I'm building something that might actually work. The night before opening day, Naira couldn't sleep. She walked through the empty academy, checking supplies for the 100th time, adjusting furniture, trying to ignore the terror clawing at her throat. What if no students came? What if this entire thing was a beautiful disaster? What if she'd fought so hard for something that ultimately failed anyway? You're spiraling, Kaylin said, finding her in the main classroom. I'm being realistic. You're being afraid. There's a difference. What if I can't do this? What if I'm good at surviving and fighting, but terrible at actually teaching? Kaylin pulled her close, and she felt their bond pulse steady and warm. Then you'll figure it out. Same way you figured out how to survive the outer ring. Same way you figured out how to cure shadow poison. You don't have to be perfect, Naira. You just have to try. That's terrifying. Most important things are. She pressed her face into his shoulder, drawing strength from his certainty. Stay with me, please. I know you have commander duties, and the king needs you for restructuring, but I already resigned my commission. Nira pulled back to look at him. What? I'm staying here. With you. With the academy. He smiled at her expression. Someone needs to handle logistics while you're busy revolutionizing medicine. And besides, his expression softened. This is where I want to be. Where you go, I go, remember? You're giving up everything. I'm choosing something better. The bond between them blazed bright, and Naira realized she was crying. You're an idiot. So you keep saying, I'm starting to think you like idiots. Just one specific idiot. He kissed her then, soft and certain, and for a moment the terror faded into something steadier. Tomorrow they'd find out if this academy was brilliant or stupid. Tonight, they had each other. Opening day arrived with rain and chaos. Naira had expected maybe 20 students, healers curious enough to risk association with experimental methods. 73 people showed up. They filled the main classroom to capacity and spilled into the hallways. Young healers fresh from apprenticeships, older practitioners frustrated with traditional limitations, even a few palace-trained physicians who'd quietly resigned their positions to attend. Nira stood at the front of the room, looking at all those expectant faces, and her mind went completely blank. Say something, Kaylin whispered from beside her. Right. Words. She was supposed to have words. I don't have a speech prepared, she started, and several students laughed nervously. I spent 3 years in exile thinking the palace had broken me. That being stripped of my title meant I'd failed at the only thing I was good at. The room was silent now, everyone listening. But the outer ring taught me something the palace never could. It taught me that healing isn't about following approved protocols. It's about saving lives however you can, using whatever works, and sometimes that means trying things that terrify you. She pulled out her journal, holding it up. This contains every forbidden technique I've developed since my exile. Methods the guild says are dangerous, unproven, heretical. There are also the methods that cured shadow poison, that saved healers everyone said were already dead, that proved the old system is incomplete. Are you saying traditional healing is wrong? Someone called from the back. I'm saying it's not enough. Traditional methods are excellent for what they do, but they're limited by doctrine written centuries ago by people who didn't have our knowledge or tools. Here, you'll learn traditional techniques. Master Torin will teach you anatomy, diagnostics, proper herb preparation, all the foundations every healer needs. Master Torin nodded from his seat. But you'll also learn experimental methods, Naira continued. Forbidden compounds, risky procedures, techniques that might fail spectacularly. And you'll learn to think critically about why methods work or don't work, instead of just accepting what you're told. That sounds dangerous, another student said. It is. People will die while we're learning. Experiments will fail. Some techniques that seem promising will turn out to be disasters. That's how knowledge advances, through mistakes and adaptation and refusal to accept that what we know now is all we can ever know. She looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as she could. If you want safety, go to a traditional guild. They'll teach you approved methods and you'll have a comfortable career treating common ailments by the book. But if you want to actually push healing forward, if you want to be part of something that might change how medicine works in this kingdom, stay here and know that it won't be easy. Silence stretched for a long moment. Then Ren from the outer ring stood up. I'm staying. One of the palace-trained healers stood. So am I. More students rose one after another until the entire room was standing. We're all staying, someone said. That's why we came. Nira felt tears threatening again and blinked them back hard. Then let's get started. The first month was brutal. Students pushed back against experimental methods, argued about safety protocols, questioned everything. 3 left in the first week, overwhelmed by the intensity. But the rest stayed. And slowly, something remarkable started happening. The outer ring healers learned proper anatomy and diagnostic techniques. The palace-trained students learned that forbidden compounds weren't inherently evil, just unstudied. Master Torin began collaborating with healer Marin on a project combining traditional surgery with experimental healing acceleration. Knowledge flowed both ways, building something neither tradition alone could achieve. News spread fast. By the second month, they had a waiting list of students. By the third month, injured soldiers from the northern campaigns were being referred to the academy for treatment the military healers couldn't provide. Naira treated a shattered leg that palace doctors said would require amputation. Using bone ash compounds and accelerated knitting techniques, she saved the leg. The soldier walked out 3 weeks later. A merchant's daughter came in with progressive organ failure. Traditional healers said she had maybe days. Healer Marin used a combination of approved medicine and experimental toxin purging. The girl survived. Case after case, the Academy proved that experimental healing wasn't just theory. It worked. But success brought attention. And not all of it friendly. The Traditionalist Healers Guild filed 3 formal complaints with the High Council in as many months. Conservative nobles wrote letters demanding the Academy be shut down. Someone, they never found out who, tried to poison the Academy's water supply. Vex caught them before anyone got hurt, but the message was clear. Not everyone wanted healing to evolve. "They're scared," Master Torin said one evening, reviewing the latest complaint. "Change always frightens people who've invested their identity in the old ways." "They're not just scared," Nira said. "They're actively trying to destroy us." "Then we need to give them something they can't destroy." Torin looked at her seriously. "We need results so undeniable they can't be dismissed as flukes. We need to cure something everyone says is incurable." As if summoned by his words, Captain Vex burst into the office. "We have a problem," she said. "The wasting plague just broke out in the lower districts. 15 confirmed cases, probably more by morning." Nira felt ice in her stomach. The wasting plague was a death sentence, a progressive degenerative condition that slowly shut down the body over weeks of agony. There was no cure, no treatment that even slowed it down. "The palace healers?" she asked. "Already pulled out. They're quarantining the district and waiting for everyone to die." "That's murder." "That's protocol," Vex said bitterly. "Can we do anything?" Nira looked at Master Torin, at Kaelin, at the pile of experimental research covering her desk. The wasting plague was beyond what they'd attempted before. More complex, more deadly, more impossible than shadow poison. But impossible was kind of their specialty now. "Gather everyone," she said. "Students, staff, anyone who wants to help. We're going to the lower districts." "Naira," Kaelin said carefully, "if you fail, if people die, the Traditionalists will use it to shut you down permanently. And if we don't try, people die anyway. At least this way we learn something." They mobilized within the hour. 30 healers, including students, descended on the quarantine district with equipment the palace said was dangerous or unnecessary. They set up a field hospital in an abandoned warehouse that was becoming depressingly familiar territory. The infected were worse than Nira expected. Skin turning gray, muscles wasting away, every breath an obvious struggle. And it was spreading. By dawn, they had 22 cases. "Traditional treatment?" she asked Master Torin. "Palliative care, keep them comfortable while they die." "Unacceptable." Nira pulled out her journal, flipping through pages of experimental compounds. "The plague attacks tissue at the cellular level. We need something that can regenerate faster than it destroys." "That doesn't exist," one of the palace students said. "Not yet." Nira looked at Healer Marin. "What if we combined your accelerated healing technique with bone ash regeneration compounds? Force the body to rebuild faster than the plague breaks it down?" "That's insane. The energy requirements alone would kill a single healer, yes. But what if we bonded?" Nira looked at Kaelin. "The bond multiplies healing power. If we could replicate that effect, distribute the energy load across multiple healers." "You're talking about creating artificial bonds," Master Torin said slowly. "That's never been done." "Nothing we do here has been done before. That's the point." They spent 6 hours developing the technique, combining traditional healing meditation with experimental compounds that temporarily linked healers' life forces. It was dangerous, untested, and might kill everyone involved. "I'm trying it first," Naira said. "If it works, we teach it to everyone. If it fails, I'm trying it next," Ren said. "Then Marin. Then everyone else here. We don't stop until we figure it out or we're all dead." The other healers nodded. Nira chose the worst case, a young woman who maybe had hours left. She administered the experimental compound, then reached out with her senses the way she had with Kaelin, looking for that resonance that meant compatible life forces. It was there. Weak, flickering, but present. She grabbed onto it, pulling strength from Kaelin through their bond and channeling it into the dying woman. The effect was immediate, power flooding through both of them, accelerating healing beyond anything Nera had managed alone. The woman's gray skin began to pink, her breathing eased, and the plague, Naira could feel it, started losing ground. "It's working," someone whispered. By sunrise, the young woman was sitting up, drinking water, no longer dying. "Teach us," the student said. "Show us how." They worked through the day and into the next night, creating temporary healing bonds with every infected patient. Not all of them survived. 3 were too far gone, their bodies unable to recover even with accelerated regeneration. But 19 lived. 19 people who should have died walked out of that warehouse. The news hit the city like a thunderclap. The academy had cured the wasting plague. The disease everyone said was impossible to treat had been beaten by experimental healing. Within days, the Traditionalist Guild withdrew their complaints. The conservative nobles went quiet. Even the High Council, the same council that had exiled Naira, sent a formal letter acknowledging the Academy's significant contribution to medical advancement. "They're terrified," Jaren said, visiting the Academy with the letter. "You've proven them wrong so thoroughly, they have no choice but to accept it. Will they shut us down anyway?" "They can't. My uncle just issued a royal decree granting the Academy permanent status as an independent institution. You're untouchable now." Naira couldn't quite process it. "We won." "You won." It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of more work. The Academy expanded. They added a second building, then a third. Students came from across the kingdom and beyond. Healers hungry to learn methods that actually worked instead of methods that were merely approved. Master Torin published papers documenting their techniques. Healer Marin started training other healers in artificial bonding protocols. The Outer Ring healers taught courses on improvised medicine, how to save lives with limited resources. And Naira found herself doing what she'd never imagined, teaching others to question everything, to experiment fearlessly, to refuse the limitation that tradition imposed. 6 months after opening, they treated their 1,000th patient. 1 year after opening, 3 other cities requested permission to establish branch academies. 2 years after opening, the Palace Healers Guild formally acknowledged experimental medicine as a valid specialty and began referring cases they couldn't handle. The system Naira had been exiled from had finally, grudgingly, evolved. On the 3rd anniversary of opening day, Naira stood in the main classroom watching a new cohort of students arrive. 73 people had shown up that first day. This year they had over 200 applications for 50 spots. "We're going to need a bigger building," Kaylin said, joining her. "We're going to need 10 bigger buildings at this rate." "Is that a problem?" "It's terrifying." She leaned into him. 3 years ago, I was living in a shed treating beggars for copper. Now I'm running an institution that's changing how healing works across the entire kingdom. How did this happen?" "You refused to stay broken." Kaylin's arm wrapped around her waist. "You took everything they used to destroy you and turned it into something better." We turned it into something better." Fair correction. They stood together watching the new students filter in, young healers full of hope and questions, ready to learn that impossible was just another word for not yet accomplished. Later that evening, after classes ended and the building quieted, Nira found herself in the laboratory where she'd first mixed the shadow poison cure. The space was different now, cleaner, better equipped, filled with research that had saved hundreds of lives. But she could still remember standing here alone, terrified, mixing forbidden compounds with shaking hands while Kaylin lay dying. "Thinking about the warehouse?" Vex asked, appearing in the doorway. "How did you know?" "You always come here when you're remembering. It's your version of visiting a grave." Nira smiled despite the heaviness in her chest. "So many people died. In the warehouse, during the plague outbreak, in experiments that failed. Sometimes I wonder if the cost was worth it. The people you saved think it was worth it. What about the ones I couldn't save? They'd probably say the same thing, that trying and failing is better than not trying at all." Vex moved closer. "You know what the Outer Ring calls you now? The healer who refused to die. Not because you survived exile, but because you refused to let your knowledge die with you." "That's dramatic." "That's accurate." Vex's scarred face was serious. "You changed the kingdom, Nira, not through politics or war, but by proving that healing could evolve. That's rare." After Vex left, Naira remained in the lab for a while longer, thinking about the queen who'd believed in her, about Kaylin's unwavering support, about every student who'd trusted her enough to learn forbidden techniques. They'd built something impossible, and it was only getting started. The next morning brought unexpected visitors, a delegation from the far territories requesting training in experimental healing for their frontier medics. Nira spent 3 hours negotiating terms, designing curriculum, planning an expansion that would have been unthinkable even a year ago. When she finally escaped to her office, she found a letter on her desk. The handwriting was familiar, elegant, precise, expensive ink on quality paper. It was from one of the High Council members who'd voted to exile her. Nira almost threw it away unread. But curiosity won. Healer Voss, I owe you an apology 3 years overdue. I voted to strip your title because I believed the Queen's death was your failure. I was wrong. You were trying to save her using methods I was too afraid to understand. That fear cost her life and nearly cost yours. I cannot undo the past, but I can acknowledge that the academy you've built represents everything our medical system should have been from the beginning: innovative, fearless, focused on results rather than doctrine. Thank you for proving an old fool wrong. With respect and regret, Master Physician Aldrin Naira read it twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer next to the Queen's final words to her. Some wounds healed faster than others. That evening, Kaylin found her on their private balcony, a space they'd claimed in the Academy's residence wing. Long day? He asked. Every day is long now, but good long, not terrible long. Progress. Definitely progress. She leaned back against him, feeling their bond hum contentedly. Do you ever regret it? Giving up your command, your position at court, everything you had? Never. Do you regret staying? In the kingdom? Sometimes. There are days I dream about leaving, starting fresh somewhere no one knows me as the disgraced healer. We could do that, pack up and disappear. Except we can't. There's too much work here, too many people depending on what we've built. She turned to face him. I'm trapped by success instead of failure. Is that better? It's different, but yes, probably better. They watched the sun set over the city, the palace district glowing gold, the outer ring falling into shadow, and somewhere between them, the academy standing as proof that change was possible. The Queen told me something once, Nira said quietly, right before she died. She said, don't let them make you small. I didn't understand then. I thought she meant don't accept exile, don't give up. That's not what she meant? That's part of it, but I think she meant something bigger. Don't let anyone, not the council, not tradition, not fear, convince you that knowledge has limits, that healing can't evolve, that the way things are is the way they have to be. She'd be proud of you. I hope so. Naira touched the spot over her heart where the bond pulsed. I hope she'd see this academy and know her death wasn't meaningless, that it sparked something that actually changed things. She'd see it, Kaylin said with certainty, and she'd probably be planning expansions, recruiting more students, pushing you to go even further. Naira laughed. You never met her. I know you, that's close enough. Years passed. The academy grew. Students graduated and opened their own practices, spreading experimental techniques across the kingdom. The artificial bonding protocol was refined, published, taught to traditional guilds who'd once dismissed it as dangerous. Naira wrote textbooks, trained new instructors, consulted on impossible cases that no one else would touch, and slowly, the title of disgraced healer faded from public memory, replaced by something else. Innovator, pioneer. The woman who proved healing could evolve. On the 10th anniversary of the Academy's founding, King Aldrich, now elderly and preparing to pass the crown to Jaren, made a surprise visit. I wanted to see it in person, he said, touring the massive complex the Academy had become. Before I abdicate, I wanted to see what my wife died fighting for. He stopped in the main hall where a memorial had been erected, the Queen's name carved in stone, surrounded by the names of every healer who'd died in service, including those killed in Alara's experiments. She was right, Aldrich said quietly. About everything. About you, about the need for change, about refusing to let tradition strangle progress. He turned to Nira. I was a coward. I let people like Alara manipulate me because accepting their lies was easier than questioning everything I'd been taught. You weren't a coward. You were human. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He touched the Queen's name gently. But I want to do something human before I step down. Something that should have been done 10 years ago. He produced a scroll, official, sealed with the royal crest. Healer Naira Voss, by royal decree, your exile is formally rescinded. Your title is restored. And on behalf of the crown, the kingdom, and every person whose life was saved by your refusal to accept limits, I apologize. Naira stared at the scroll. Somewhere inside her, the 20-something healer who'd been dragged through palace gates in chains finally exhaled. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. You earned this 1,000 times over. Aldrich smiled sadly. My wife would have made you master healer, given you authority over all medical practice in the kingdom. But I suspect that's not what you want. No, the academy is enough. More than enough. Then I'll leave you to it. Build something that outlasts all of us. After Aldrich left, Naira stood alone in the memorial hall, holding the scroll that restored her title. Kalen found her there an hour later. How does it feel? He asked. Strange. For 10 years I've been the disgraced healer. That defined me. And now, she gestured at the scroll. I'm officially legitimate again. Does that change anything? No, not really. She set the scroll aside. I'm still the same person, still fighting the same fights. The title doesn't matter. Then why are you crying? She touched her face, surprised to find tears. Because someone finally said I was right. Not just successful, not just useful, right. And I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. Kalen pulled her close. Through their bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that she'd always been right. The system tried to break you, he said. You broke the system instead. We broke the system together. I'll accept that correction. They stood in the memorial hall surrounded by names of the dead and the proof of everything they'd built from that tragedy. Outside, students were practicing artificial bonding techniques in the courtyard. In the laboratory, researchers were developing new treatments for conditions everyone said were incurable. In the clinic, healers were saving lives using methods that hadn't existed 15 years ago. The kingdom had changed, not perfectly, not completely, but measurably. And at the center of it all was a woman who'd refused to let exile define her, who'd turned forbidden knowledge into legitimate healing, who'd proven that evolution wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Naira Voss, who'd been cast out and called a failure, had rewritten the rules of power itself, not through domination, but through connection strong enough to change everything. Years later, when students asked about the Academy's founding, they'd tell the story different ways. Some emphasized the political intrigue. Others focused on the medical breakthroughs. Some turned it into legend, the healer who'd cured death itself. But those who'd been there from the beginning knew the truth. It wasn't about one person's brilliance or one technique's power. It was about refusing to accept that knowledge had limits, about choosing evolution over tradition, about building something new from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy you, and about two people, healer and warrior, Omega and Alpha, who'd proven that true strength came from balance, not dominance. The Academy stood as proof, and it would stand for generations to come.